68.5 million people are displaced at the end of 2017. Refugees who have fled their countries to escape conflict and persecution accounted for 25.4 million of the 68.5 million. This is 2.9 million more than in 2016. It is also the biggest increase UNHCR has seen in a single year. So today, as we mark World Refugee Day, we must remember that no one becomes a refugee by choice, but the rest of us can have a choice about how we actually help. I'd like to welcome to the studio Tresor Riziki, who is a musician and a UNHCR LuQuLuQu high-level influencer, and Markku, Aikomus, who is a senior external relations officer and spokesperson for the UNHCR regional office for Southern Africa. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you very much.
Markku, I'd like to begin with you because these figures are they're very upsetting. 68.5 million people. It's the highest number recorded for refugees around the world ever.
Absolutely. These are staggering numbers, and this has been the trend in the past 5-6 years that the numbers are going up. And that's just a reflection of the magnitude of the human suffering around the world for the people who've been forced to flee because of conflict, war and persecution.
Where would we find most of these refugees coming from?
Most of the refugees many of the refugees are coming from Syria. That is one of the number one refugee-producing countries. But the Africa, per se, is one of the continents that is also producing and hosting large numbers of refugees.
Yeah.
And in Africa context, South Sudan, Somalia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo are one of those countries that are producing high numbers of refugees.
Something that we also have to consider, and this for me is the most devastating part of the whole thing, is that over half of this number that you're talking about, 68.5 million, are children that have either been separated from their parents or who have fled alone to try and find a better life. That is devastating. I mean, I don't know if you'd like to speak about that, Tresor.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. As a former refugee myself and a Congolese born, I think it's quite crazy that in our day, up until today, the crisis is still pretty mad, and I'm just hoping that with the UNHCR and the government and the power that will be able to change the narrative of refugees. At the moment, I think in Congo, in the crisis in Kasai, in South Kivu and other regions, it's really, I think things are really still getting bad. So, and on this day today, I hope people are going to get to remember those people that really flee the countries, not because they have the choice, but because they actually need to better their life elsewhere.
How difficult was it for you? Because, we've been crossing to our reporter now at the Desmond Tutu Centre there, and these asylum seekers stroke refugees are desperate, and they are being confronted by corruption, asked for money that they don't have. 200 Rand for somebody that has literally the T-shirt on their back is almost impossible to get what they need, these relevant papers. Your experience in South Africa, what was it like? Look,
it's a very, very, very horrible situation because, as you said, most of the guys that really are very desperate and refugee centers, they don't really have anything whatsoever. And for them being first, I've faced pretty much the same situation before. You pretty much have to chase the papers for about 10 years, eventually to be in a place where you're stable, permanent resident. And it's not the best experience for anybody. And, that's why I always say people, I don't think anyone really, it's like a wish that you want to be a refugee. You always want to be home, and a lot of time you leave because there's not really any other way. And I've always thought it's up to us or people that are really in good position to try to help refugees feel at home, feel welcome, and also because they've been broken, and you really want to make sure they feel better and they get in a position where they start building again.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the things you said there that really people must understand, nobody ever wants to be a refugee. Why would you want to leave your beautiful home and go somewhere where you know nothing, you know no one, and you are nothing to try and start a new life? The biggest problem, however, and I think it's a misconception as well, is we find that people think that most of the refugees go to the northern parts of the world, whereas they are being accommodated in developing countries. I mean, these are the highest countries. We talk about DRC, South Sudan, countries like Syria, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Myanmar and Somalia. They've got 2/3 of all the refugees. You know, you've got your Americas, your Italys. They're actually forcing them away now.
Oh, absolutely. You know, the 9 out of the 10 refugees and forcibly displaced are actually either in their host countries, or in their own countries, or in the countries next door. So the developing countries are bearing the most of the burden in these situations, and this is why it's very important that the support is not only given to the refugees but also to those communities and countries that are hosting the most of the world refugees.
Yeah, I mean, these policies within the US right now, and I think that it's making headlines all over the world, and it's making a lot of people upset, particularly in America. I mean, this whole issue of separating children from their parents as they come in as asylum seekers or refugees. What do you make of these policies?
Well, we believe that, you know, the family unity is in the best interest of the children, that the family is kept together, and there's other ways of looking at the security interest. But I think what's important to remember here, as you said, that the refugees are the victims of the conflict. They are suffered so much. So this is very important that, you know, we come together and try to find the humane solutions to help them.
Yeah, and also with the US now withdrawing from the UN Human Rights Council, this is another big problem that's affecting the United Nations and refugees and human rights abuses all over the world. I can imagine this is a major blow.
Well, in 2016, you know, the 193 members of the UN came together, and they provided a New York declaration which says, you know, confirms the support for the refugee protection and also supporting the host communities and refugees. So I think the willingness is still here, and we try to find the new ways of working that we can have predictable and more comprehensive ways of providing support and assistance to refugees where they need.
Finally, I'll leave the last word with you, Tresor. In terms of being a high-level influencer for this LuQuLuQu tribe that has been established for the UNHCR, how do you help? I mean, how can normal people help?
Thank you so much. And I think the whole concept of LuQuLuQu is pretty much about Africans coming together to help Africans. There's so many, I think, so many ways to help. You can also go on donation.unhcr.org and be able to donate there. And I think you already give the SMS line.
Yeah.
I think you can donate as much. I think, if I'm not mistaken, from 40 Rand up. And I mean, it's a beautiful thing, and I think it's really up to us to change the narrative of refugees, because I think there's nothing greater than really building other people up.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for talking to us on this World Refugee Day. Spare a thought for refugees, do what you can. And I think the easiest way to help is to just send an SMS. You have to SMS that word LuQuLuQu, it's LuQuLuQu, to the number 42656, and it'll cost you just 30 Rand to help. Tresor, thank you very much. Great to see you. Thanks very much for coming in. And also Markku, Aikomus, who is the Senior External Relations Officer for the UNHCR in the Southern Africa office. Thank you very much for talking to us as well. The time just